Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. In this episode, we are creating high-key images. Now last week I posted a video on editing low-key images, so I'm going to use some of these exact same images and make them high-key. High-key images are bright overall exposures, minimum shadows, dominant light tones, low contrast, and so why wouldn't you want to learn how to do this amazing technique? Now, I'm going to be editing these images in both Lightroom and in Photoshop, so be sure to stay around to the end. And with that, let's get started. If you are new to this channel, my name is Shannon, and I am a full-time photographer in beautiful British Columbia. Whether you're here to learn, be inspired, or simply enjoy some stunning visuals, you've come to the right place. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this. All right, I'm starting in Photoshop. If you're here to watch about Lightroom, don't worry, we're gonna cover that a little bit later. This is an image that my wife took up in the Canadian Arctic of a family of polar bears. Now, if you've seen my last video, which is this one right here, I did basically the opposite of what we're doing right now, which was low-key images. We're doing pretty much the same steps, but for high keys. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go down to the bottom right here, which is our adjustments layer icon. So when we click on it, brings up all these different adjustment layers. Everything from brightness to contrast to vibrance, you name it, it's in here. And what we're gonna pick is exposure. And this is the same as my other YouTube video. Instead of going up with the gamma correction and down with the exposure, we're gonna do the opposite. Now take a look at the gamma correction. When I bring it down, it softens everything. So we're just going to bring that up to there. That looks pretty good. Now the layer mask here is white. White is to reveal, black, so if we go Command I to invert, black conceals it. And so it's concealing that adjustment that we just made. So you can't see it. All you see is the photo that my wife took. So when we want to bring the adjustment layer back, but have creative control, we can grab, a few different tools over here. One I like the most, which is the pen tool. And then we just got to make sure that if it's something we're going to bring back, we want white paint to conceal or to reveal it. Same applies that if it's white for the layer mask, if we use black paint, so you can switch this back and forth by pressing X on your keyboard. You can paint back all the detail. Now I'm going to go up to my opacity and make sure that that's not cranked way to the hills, but down around 30%. And then I'm just going to slowly brush in the details of the polar bear here. And I'm even going to paint in some of the details of the landscape here. So I still want to show a bit of depth within the image, but not too much. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we'll go to curves, and we'll take the highlights, which is the top of the chart here. We'll bring that up, and the bottom here is dealing with our shadows. We're going to bring that up as well, which really softens and gives it that sort of snowy whiteout condition. I'll go Command I. And here's where I'm actually painting in, white. So I might paint in a little bit here and behind the polar bear. Just remove some of the sort of contrasty textures within this image. And already I like that. Now let's go back down to adjustments layer and go to brightness and contrast. Now the fur doesn't have that sort of pop to it. So that's where our contrast comes in. So if you bring up the contrast, you can see that it really brightens up those highlights and crushes some of the blacks. And I might even bring up the exposure a tiny bit. So let's look at that. If I go Command I, that's what it looked like before. And that's really just overexposed some of those areas. So I'm going to go to black, and I'm going to make sure my paintbrush is white. And I'm going to paint in some of that contrast. That looks great. Okay, and the last thing that I'm going to do is go to a soft color. So I went down to my adjustments layer, click solid color. Now I want to pick something that's gray. Not super bright, not super dark, but we can go somewhere in the middle here, press OK. And right now it's just a color, it's just gray that I picked. But we can give that color a feature, a sort of purpose. And that purpose is going to be screen. So there's a lot of other purposes you can do here. You can do color burn, which burns your image, you know, dodge and burning. So burning and darkens it. But it's also applying that gray color to it. You can also soften the light, or hard light, vivid light, all of these different things, but it's applying gray to the image. What we're going to do is screen, and screen does that sort of super foggy, atmospheric, snowstorm sort of look to it. And we're going to go Command I to remove it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint in almost like there's snow or some sort of haze on the bottom area of the polar bear, maybe on the back a tiny bit. And it just adds a bit of atmosphere, especially around the foreground here, even the background. Sort of a whiteout condition. And you can go extreme here. Let's see what extreme looks like. We can even go back to the color layer here. And you can see how you can really add in that snowy sort of wispy wind look. Even that looks pretty great. Lovely. So that's the look that I wanted. And here are the results. Okay, here is a wolf picture that I had in my last video that I made into a low-key image. And this is the before and after of what that looked like. Don't worry, I'll have a link if you want to check out that video down below and at the end of this video. But we're going to do the same steps, but it's going to be high key. Again, we're going to go down to our adjustments layer and we're going to pick exposure. Now, instead of going up with the gamma correction and down with the exposure, we are actually going to go down with the gamma correction, softening and brightening everything, and bring up the exposure. That looks pretty good. Right now it's white, so we're going to grab our black paintbrush and I'm going to start painting back some of these details. Now I could select the wolf. That's a whole other video on how to properly select your subject. Like the wolf here has got tons of hair. But what I could do is I could go to select down to subject here. It's going to do its best to outline it. It doesn't do a great job, but those ears, I might want those ears there to be in the image. So I'm going to paint out here, and as you can see, I can paint over that line, and it's not going to bring back the details of the background because I have that little ant line there that's stopping me, that little cutout. So yeah, that did a pretty good job. Very nice. Okay, now we're going to go down to adjustments layer, brightness and contrast, and we're going to bring up the contrast, and we're going to bring up the brightness. It's going to bring highlights, crush some of those darks. Okay, I'm going to bring back a little bit of those details again. We're kind of losing the animal. There we go. It's fine if we have some texture sort of in the background here. It's high key, but it doesn't have to be over the top. Now, this next selection I really like because this brings a bit of smoke and fog feel into the image, and that's going to be our solid color again. We're going to pick gray, just anywhere in the middle here. We can adjust it a little bit later. And we're going to go from normal, being a color, down to screen. There we go, beautiful screen here. Go Command I, and I'm going to start painting in just around the wolf here, especially around the fur there. That's looking great. Now another step that I can do to bring some contrast back to this image is go back to my solid color here. Now this is where we can actually pick a color. Pick a blue, darker blue here. We go from normal all the way down to soft light. And here we can bring in some of that contrast. This is the adjustment layer that it made. And I really like the way that looks. So invert it, make it black. So then we paint with our white some of those contrasting details that look really nice in high key images. All right, let's see what this looks like in black and white. We're gonna do adjustment down to saturation. Let me know what you guys think. Again, black and white, does it do it? I think color still wins overall. Okay, we are in Lightroom. This image I did in low key. Here's the two shots. Now we're gonna do almost the same steps, but we're gonna do it for high key. So the first thing I wanna do is brighten up my subject here. So we're gonna go up to the masking layers here, click on that, and we're gonna click on subject. It's gonna highlight our subject here, nice and clean, and I'm gonna just bring up the exposure, the shadows, add a little bit of contrast. Maybe bring down the blacks a little bit. Contrast is nice in high key images. The next thing we're going to do is select the background, and I could create a new mask that selects the background, or I could just invert this one. So I'm going to hit the dot 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 here of our layer mask that we just did, and I'm going to go down to duplicate and invert mask. So now we got our background. This is where the exposure is going to come way up. Maybe our shadows here. Voila, we almost got ourselves a high key image. Now, one of the things that we did in Photoshop was slide that gamma correction way down, and it softened our image. When we brought it up for our low key shots, it added a lot of contrast and it made it darker, which makes sense for low key. For high key, we want it soft and bright. Well, dehaze is designed to remove haze. So if we were to slide it up here, it would remove haze, and it adds a lot of contrast. And it looks really bad if you do this in your normal edits and you're pretty heavy with your hand on dehaze. And it just removes haze. Well, here we kind of want to add some haze. So I like bringing haze into here. Now, it kind of made everything in the background quite bright. So I'm going to go back up to my exposure and bring that back down so that there's some texture. And already that looks great. The next thing I want to do is sort of marry the two, the background and the subject, by grabbing a paintbrush. And I find the paintbrush just the easiest. And I'm going to load up that paintbrush with a bit of exposure, up the shadows. We'll just leave it at that for now. And I'm basically just going to paint this bright light that's kind of coming in for this high key shot. And there we go. It just adds a little bit more softness between the subject and the background. So there isn't any sharp lines there. It's a little softer. Okay, I'm going to go down to brush. I'm going to go down to dehaze, bring the dehaze way down, and bring the shadows up. I'm going to take that brush, and I'm just going to brush in a bit of atmosphere. There we go. So I added a little bit of atmosphere sort of on the back where that light is coming in and shining on its chest right here, on those feathers. So that looks really good. Now, I might want to select the brush again and then just bring that contrast way up and the blacks down just to bring maybe some contrast back into the body. And there you go. I love that. I think color looks superb. So the last thing that I did there, I know there's a few layers that I've added, but the last thing is that I brought the blacks down and the contrast up so that when I painted back in the features of this raven, everything is just popping and it's sort of glistening with that high reflective look from this high key background. This very bright background is just shining off of those surfaces, and it's really just making it sort of stand out and pop. Well, if you like this episode and you learned something, please give me that thumbs up. And if you aren't subscribed, think about subscribing. These images were taken on other adventures of mine, and I got some of those YouTube videos right here for you to check out. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you on the next episode. Ciao.